Good evening, everybody. My name is Sally Armstrong. I'm a journalist. I work in zones of conflict, and my beat is to find out what happens to women and girls in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Congo. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is the way young people the world over have become the new change makers. It has to do with the power of personal will. Let me explain what I mean by that. We've always relied on political will and public will to make change. That's not new. You know, the stroke of the politician's pen in order to right the wrongs in our society, or all those petitions we sign, or the marches we go into as a way of public protesting, and that forces, of course, the politician to sign that piece of paper. But something new has come along, something that I've been witnessing as a journalist for the past several years. Maybe it's because girls the world over are fed up with waiting for the politicians to make the changes that need to be made for their own safety. Maybe they're a little riled up about having to march in order to have rape laws observed, or to get their own right to participate in society. Whatever it is, and maybe it's because of the increase in education of girls the world over, the issue of personal will has now taken the stage and is playing a very powerful role in leadership today. Malala Yousafzai would be a great example. You know, Malala, you remember the 15-year-old who was insisted on going to school in the Swat Valley and the stupid Taliban shot her in the head for her trouble? Well, she didn't make world headlines because some politician in the Swat Valley signed a paper saying girls have to go to school. Indeed, nor did she go to school because of a public protest. There was no worldwide protest saying girls in the Swat Valley have got to start to go to school. Malala decided she was going to go to school because she wanted to learn to think for herself, and she went despite the threats from the cowardly Taliban. They shot this girl in the head. They claimed they were doing it in the name of God. Well, Malala went to the hospital and she got better, and she went back to school and she started a movement. Malala has become the world's daughter, and that is an outstanding example of personal will. There's another case I want to tell you about. Maybe you heard about this case, about 160 little girls between the ages of 3 and 17 in Kenya. They sued their government for failing to protect them from being raped. There are laws on the books in Kenya. They call it defilement, and defilement is a crime. But the problem is men have impunity. Hardly anyone ever gets arrested for rape, and almost nobody goes to jail. But this case started because a 12-year-old girl, 12 years old, called Millie, stood up at a village meeting near Meru, Kenya, and she said, "I want to go to school, but I can't go to school because I'm pregnant. And I'm pregnant because that man sitting over there raped me." This is personal will. And you know, the case is now known as the 160 girls case, and they did win. But when they won it for 10 million girls in Kenya. And now, of course, everyone, politicians, the public, they're all on board because they're trying to retrain the judiciary and alter the lives of girls in Kenya. They have a long way to go, but the journey has begun. And this is because of the personal will of one girl. There's another story I want to share with you. I'm sure you read about the hideous Boko Haram kidnapping 270 girls in Chibok in northern Nigeria. Well, something happened that day that hardly anybody talks about. When U.S. President Barack Obama said he was sending strategic advisors and surveillance equipment to Nigeria to find those girls, he made history. No government, no military has ever in history gone anywhere to rescue girls. The message was clear for the first time. Girls count and education is paramount. Now, although those girls are still, many of them are still missing, and although the story could still have a tragic ending, there's a piece of it that enforced my belief that personal will is the leader. I had to do a story on this, the Boko Haram kidnapping for the Ottawa Citizen. And in that story, I interviewed, one of the girls who had escaped. and she was 14 years old. She escaped by jumping off the back of a fast-moving truck that was loading those girls into the village and then racing out of the village with them. She jumped off the back of the truck, she rolled into the bush, and she tried to cover herself with debris so that nobody would see her. Well, of course, the Boko Haram thugs saw her jump. They stopped the trucks. They went into the bush with big poles, sticking it into the ground to try to find where the girl was hiding. And thankfully, they didn't find her. But my question to her was, where did you get the nerve to jump off the back of a fast-moving truck? Well, she didn't skip a beat. She said, I figured you can only die once. If I stayed on the truck, they'd kill me, so I jumped. But you know, I talked to the villagers about this and said, this is extraordinarily brave. What's going on here? And you know what they told me? They said, these girls are all going to school. They all have plans for themselves. They're all planning to go away to university to learn, to come back and fix the many problems we have here in Chibok. This is also personal will. And this is the kind of leadership that I see in my work as a journalist that is making the biggest change in the world today. Young people are talking in ways they never talked before. The taboo on speaking out about sexual assault has been broken. And everyone knows if you can't talk about it, you can't change it. The girls are talking. And this is the girl talk that's altering the relationship between political will, public will, and all of the rest of us. You see, political will may lag behind, public will may surge ahead, or indeed retreat. But what salvages both of them is the person who stands up and says, this is what I want. That electrifies the public and the political. When you look at this as binary, the political and the public, it needs to be pushed by the personal. The individual who says, it's not okay with me. What you are doing, in my opinion, is wrong. And that is what's driving the bus for the change for girls around the world today. You know, equality law and gender advocacy depend on these individuals. And social media is what is driving the access to their stories. Social media inspires people. It lets us relate to all the details. It gives us the heart and soul of the stories. When we look at Facebook or Snapchat or Twitter or Instagram, we're seeing personal accounts that tell us what's really going on. Not always accurately, but tells us what's going on. And that provides momentum and a much more powerful case for the public to sweep the issue toward political will. You know, I was in Iraq recently on assignment for Maclean's magazine, and I met a lot of young Yazidi girls who are furious that no one came to rescue them when ISIS attacked. They took matters into their own hands, these young girls. They went around trying to raise money so they could buy back their mothers and their sisters who were being held as sex slaves by ISIS. Now they're in refugee camps scattered around the town that I was working from, Duhok. Every tent had a horror story, and their waiting game was indeed an agony. One young girl, Amira Hussein, 14 years old, she has a tattoo on her left arm that says, "Bring back my people." She's wearing a chain around her neck that holds a photo of her missing older brother and says it's so he can always be close to me. She's cynical and she's critical of those who did not help. She said to me, I was taken to what Daesh calls infidel village, along with 3 of my cousins. I was given to an ISIS fighter called Abdullah as a slave. 8 months later, she escaped. But, she says, if the world cared about us, they would have rescued every girl by now, but no one cares. Now that's a pretty tough indictment to hear, but speaking out like this for a young girl is also personal will. They have something to say, and they're going to share it. You know, it's young people like Malala, Millie, and Amira that are the new change makers today. This is a new brand of leadership in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, and indeed right here in Victoria, BC. They're speaking truth to power, because for youth leadership today, power is personal. Thank you.